You're listening to the Pulled by the Root podcast.
Hello, I'm so glad you're here to listen in to the episode with therapist Janet Nordine. Janet is just one of these people that exudes warmth and kindness and compassion. My time with her, it just made me rethink a lot of things. We discussed issues like trauma, attachment. We even talked about play. We talked about reunion. We shared some very difficult moments speaking about sexual abuse, so please know that that is in the context of this episode as well. But also there's a lot of hope in this episode. Janet really gives us touch points for trying to come to terms with our trauma and being able to integrate it so that we can live a more meaningful and less stressed life. I'm just really glad that you're here to listen in. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Pulled by the Root podcast. I am overjoyed to bring you therapist Janet Nordine. When I was coming out of the fog 7-8 months ago, I've kind of lost track now. It was Haley Radke's podcast Adoptees on where I first heard Janet's voice, and it was literally like a blanket of comfort during this very painful time. And I just knew I had to reach out and speak to Janet. And I'd like to read you her bio so you can learn more about her. Most of you probably already know her, but I would like to just go ahead and reiterate her work and what she's doing. And then we'll just jump into some really good conversation. Janet Nordine, MS, LMFT, all these letters. I don't have any of these. RPT is an adoption, compassionate, and competent therapist working with all members of the adoption constellation: adoptee, adoptive parent, birth parent, and family members and their supporters. Janet has advanced training to meet the needs of the adopted child and family. She is a registered play therapist, a trust-based relational intervention practitioner, and she is trained in level 1 TheraPlay. Janet is an attachment focused and has a clinical foundation in Gestalt theory. Her personal connection to adoption is that she is a baby scoop era adoptee and an advocate for adoptee rights. She is an expert on being adopted. I love this line. She has been adopted for her whole life, so I guess I'm an expert too. As an adoptee, she has a unique perspective and understands the clinical aspects of adoption trauma. Janet works with children who are in the process of being adopted and who are adopted to help them express their experiences. For the last 10 years, Janet worked extensively with children in foster care system, and she is a co-facilitator of the Las Vegas Adoptees Connect group. She also works with adult adoptees as a therapist in Nevada and as a consultant for those out of Nevada to help them navigate the many emotions and aspects of being an adopted person. On her blog, her hope is to share her thoughts, ideas, experiences, and some how-tos on living life with courage and how it feels to be adopted. So, Janet, we'll make sure that there's also a way for our audience to connect with you further with links. I'm just so grateful that you are here, and I would love to hear more about your adoption story and how your life transitioned into becoming a therapist for all of us.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of what you're creating. My adoption story started in Henderson, Nevada, where I was born in 1965. So I just outed my age. And what I knew about that time in a Catholic hospital is there were 2 doors, and the mother was wheeled in one door and out that door, and the baby was taken out the other door. When I learned this information, it was before I was a therapist, before I had gone back to school to become a therapist. It really bothered me that the mother may not have even seen me. My mother may not have even seen me. So that was part of the process for me to looking into becoming an attachment focused therapist. So I became a therapist kind of later in life. I was in my 40s. I'd worked in the hotel industry here in Las Vegas for many years. And when 9/11 happened, I was an executive manager of a hotel and we were all let go. So I had to reevaluate my life and decide what I wanted to do. And what I'd originally wanted to do is become a social worker. So I went back to school and ended up with a degree in marriage and family therapy. And my very first job was working with children in foster care and children that had been sexually abused. And I have a childhood history of trauma, so that was a big catalyst for me to want to be part of the community of helping children to heal, be able to support them in whatever they needed. So that's kind of the reason I became a therapist, was just to help kids, and that's been my focus for the past, 15 years that I've been a therapist now.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I think that painted such an image, the two doors.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I wasn't sure if that was a true story because I'd heard that from a few people. I'd been involved with an organization called Nevada Open to try to open adoption records here many, many years ago, and it was unsuccessful. And I'd heard that from many people, birth mothers and adoptees that had been born in the hospital I was born in with Catholic Charities. And I didn't want to believe that because it just sounded so awful, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and the truth, I think, is difficult for all of us to reconcile sometimes, for sure. You know, you spoke about childhood trauma, and I think a lot of people that are listening have experienced that, Janet. And I think it's really one of the things that stood out when I was researching you further is the invitation to experience courage.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
And I think, you know, for me, and I think a lot of people, we think of courage as being this, you know, there's no tears, there's no fear. How do you define that? And why is that fundamentally the base of what we see when we look on your website? Like, that's the first thing that stood out to me.
Yeah. My tagline for many years has been, courage is the ability to walk through fear with faith, and faith in whatever you believe in. And for me, for a long time, it was a higher power, still is a higher power. Also believing in myself, like I'm going to get through to the other side and be okay through this fear. And courage is quiet. It doesn't have to be, you know, on the battlefield of life. It's quiet, like just getting out of the bed in the morning sometimes for people takes courage.
I would agree with that. I think I read something or heard something where sometimes if you just put your feet on the ground, that's an act of courage for sure.
Absolutely.
How has your own therapeutic practice helped heal you? Like, can you give us an insight into where you're at in the you know, as far as your own healing journey? I know it's a lifelong process, but I'm just curious, like I need hope because I am just out of the fog and it feels so raw.
Yeah.
And just to be able to look ahead, you know.
Yeah. I, 4 years ago, it's been 4 years in February since I entered reunion. And prior to that, I had this big fantasy of how it would be. And my mother would accept me and love me and want me in her life. And it was none of those things. It was difficult. The story was difficult that I came upon. I found out I'm one of, on both sides of my paternal and maternal family of 16 siblings total. That was difficult. Yeah. You can't see her, but her eyes got huge.
Yes.
That's usually people's response. Like, how many
I need
siblings?
To sit down. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there was just so much of the story that was painful and hard. And, you know, as an adopted child, we often have experienced rejection even before we're here in the earth life of being a person and having a body and being out of the womb. You know, we're rejected from sometimes conception. The mother doesn't want to be pregnant. The father wasn't expecting to be a father. And so that feeling of rejection starts very early for many of us. For me, my mother had already had 5 children and was definitely not expecting me as number 6. Her children were in foster care. My brothers were in foster care at the time of my birth. And so I was, she called me an unexpected mistake when I spoke to her. And so I had lived with that for some time, that feeling as a little girl, like, oh, I probably shouldn't even be here because my own mother didn't want me. And that's the place I am in my journey of healing is letting go of that story I've told myself for so long, that my brain has told me, because I definitely have a purpose here. I definitely have a reason of being here. I'm not a mistake. None of us are mistakes. We were tiny little babies that just were born into a circumstance, and none of us are a mistake.
Janet, that's such a powerful reminder. And I'm so sorry that you had to discover such a painful story. And I think that leads me to my next question. When I would sit in church with my grandmother, I would look, there was a plaque and it said, "You shall know the truth and the truth will set you free."
Mm-hmm.
And when I discovered my own story, I was not mentally prepared for what I was going to discover. And I think that it would be really amazing as a therapist for you to maybe interject some advice here, because in my case, and that's all I can speak about, is I created untold damage to the people around me because I wanted my answers. I wasn't careful. I didn't know what I was doing. As you're entering into reunion, how do you advise people to prepare for this big question mark? What can you tell people to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, if we look at adoption as trauma, and the trauma happened when we were tiny babies, when we are an adult and we're reminded of that trauma and finding your family and your story, myself as well, we may come from a place being a very young child. Our actions and behaviors and thought processes are as a very young child. I remember feeling like I wanted to have just a big tantrum because I was just so angry and like I hadn't gotten my cookie or something. That's how it felt. And that's because the trauma was very young in my body and I didn't know how to handle it. And I didn't know how to handle the story. And I wanted all the answers immediately. And I reached out to everyone I could find. And it was really hard, not to get everything I wanted. And at the same time wanting to have a tantrum, but no space to have it because I didn't know what that feeling meant. I was working with a therapist at the time who just kept reminding me to slow down and take it easy, but I couldn't slow down and take it easy because I needed to know everything right away because it had been, 51 years and I just had been searching and I wanted this story. And I had an expectation. I was very attached to the expectation. And when my expectation wasn't met and wasn't true and wasn't what I expected, I was devastated and I kind of fell apart. So it's that attachment to the expectation that I had to refigure, and I'm still working on that attachment to the expectation.
Janet, I so appreciate your honesty. I mean, you could have said something entirely different. I think the truth is very important. And I think that even with your therapeutic background, you're still struggling. And that's reassuring. I know that sounds, it just feels a little bit more approachable.
Yeah. And this is a phrase my therapist has taught me. I was a tiny little baby. We were all tiny little babies. And when tiny little babies don't have their needs met, they cry and cry and cry. And that's what I felt like doing. Sometimes I still feel like doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have this attachment to be worthy of love. And when that need isn't met right at birth, we struggle. We're looking for that worthiness all the time.
Yeah. And that leads me actually to my next question. I'd love to dive in. You speak about attachment and helping people with attachment issues. And I really didn't think I had any problems with that. But after reflecting, I see that, I think the terminology is good adoptee, bad adoptee. I'm learning all the language. I'm still a student. But I definitely fell into the people pleaser, please love me. And then I would have this heap of resentment afterward because I had to work so hard, or I felt I did, to be valued and loved. Like if I just did the extra and this much and that much more. And I think it's really interesting how it plays out in adoptees, this attachment. And I know it's not as simple as one answer, but is it about awareness? How do we begin to have healthy attachments? That's probably a very big question.
Yeah. It's having somebody in your life that doesn't leave you, even though you act like the tantruming baby. I mean, it's that easy and that difficult, simple, not easy. Attachment really starts at the moment of conception. We are attached literally to something, to someone. And when we don't have that need met right away when we're born, we're looking for, where's that voice, that smell, what I was used to. And then we're placed in another. In my case, I went to one home, then I went to foster care, and then I went to my adoptive home. I was a little bit older. So there was that constant checking and looking and wondering. And an attachment is something that, is earned. There's different types of attachment. And when we're coming from a place of having an attachment wound, it's a trauma response. You talk about being busy and try to people please. It's a trauma response that you're having. Because if I don't please people, and if I don't stay busy, and if I don't do enough, and I'm not enough, then am I worthy of love?
Yeah.
I'm the poster child for busy. I keep myself very busy, and then I resent myself for being busy. But I do it because I feel somewhere in my body and my nervous system that if I'm not doing more and being enough, then my life doesn't count for something.
Whew.
Trauma response. Yeah.
That's so perfectly said. And I was talking to another adoptee who was talking about compound trauma. Mm-hmm. And yes. I'm like, oh my goodness, layers. And I think, when you
multiple
speak about
traumas,
the other abuse that you experienced as a child too, a lot of us are dealing with not just one layer, but many. And I also want to turn to hope at some level. And I know that's a really broad word, but I think that what I want for my own life, and I'm sure most people want, are just more space. I know you're a play therapist, to have joy, to have a break. And how does that aspect help us heal? Just being able to not let the weight of this suffocate us all the time, because it can be so drowning. Like sometimes I just feel like there's just nothing bright out there. It's all so dark. And even though I feel like I'm watching a movie a lot of the time, like, oh, this is really nice for everyone.
Like you're floating above watching the camera. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know.
Play is the language of children. And if we think of ourselves as adults that have this inner child, it's so important to play. Most of my life, I really loved to play. I love Legos. I have Legos sitting on my desk looking at me right now. One of my favorite ones. It's Wonder Woman, and she's all in gold. And anyway,
oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So I've really had this playful, as an adult, love of toys and Disney and things like that. So it's been easy for me to transition to being a play therapist. It's been 2 years since I received the certification. I love children's books. Just lots of things resonate with me with children. And I think that comes from a place of, that little child in me just still wants to play. And when I'm sitting on the floor with a child and we're playing a game, or we're playing with cars and I'm working with a client, it's all about the client. And I notice that little spark inside of me feels really happy also.
That's so beautiful.
I'm a sand tray therapist. We're using objects and mini toys and things in sand, which accesses the subconscious level of a person's thoughts and mind. I do that with adults, and it's amazing to see how they suddenly see things differently through the sand and what they're using from a subconscious level.
I think that's so important, because one of the things we want to do at Pulled by the Root, the way that I've been able to cope, and we all have a different coping style, is through creativity.
Yes.
Like I remember being a little girl, and we lived in Tucson, Arizona, and I would spend hours picking through the sand and finding these little sand rubies. And I would make a fort under a tree, and it would be my living room. And I always had a place to go in my imagination. And I think the visual arts and music and being able to express, it's such a powerful, powerful thing. And I wonder if there's a crossover between play and art in a way that maybe it feels and heals something inside of us. How do you feel about that?
I often come home with glitter and markers on my pants just all the time, because kids need to create, and I create as well. And we'll sit and color together, and I enjoy that. And I will sometimes color at home because I like to do that. It's very peaceful. And I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm an artist, but I do enjoy creating things, collages, out of magazine clippings. It's fun as well, just to see what comes out, because we don't always have access to our inside world, but through creativity, we can get a glimpse of what's really on the inside.
Yes, and I think also
Because our
seeing other
brain gets in the way. Yeah.
Oh yeah, my brain's always in the way. It's very difficult. But I think by looking at other people's creativity too, we can reflect off of that and have an experience as well.
Absolutely.
So it's really, really nice to have that validated for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things you said too, one of the questions you asked on your website is, are you ready to feel again? That's a zinger.
That all the time as well. Yeah.
And because I think that's a tough one.
Yeah. Because our nervous system, we have the top of our nervous system when we feel good, and we just kind of in this, it's called ventral space. Life is just kind of flowing and emotions come and go. And then there's the fight or flight, where many of us respond from that initial knee-jerk response of, what do you mean by that? And we get nervous and scared, and we take off, and we won't connect, and we won't be with people. And then there's the freeze. And that's where I have realized I have spent a lot of my time. It's in that freeze response where I want to be numb because I don't want to feel these big emotions. So are you ready to feel again? Are you ready to come out of that place and step into a new awareness? I've actually stopped using that phrase, out of the fog, because it just didn't fit for me as a person. And I have started saying I'm walking into a new awareness, because the fog feels like we're really othering each other. There's the out of the fog adoptees, and then there's the ones that aren't, and they're, whatever we label. But if we can always look at awareness, are we stepping into a new awareness about ourselves and our environment and how we're living life? It feels softer and more gentle and more accepting to me. So that's what feeling is about, stepping into a new awareness. Are you ready for that?
Wow, that's so powerful. I love that idea too of, it's not that really definitive. It's either you're in or out of it.
Yeah, it's different for
a
everyone, and it's a journey. Yeah, it's a journey.
It's definitely a journey. And so if you think you're kind of ready to feel again,
you don't have to feel it all at once.
Okay, good.
You don't have to do it all at once. It looks like acceptance acceptance of the here and now. Like, can I fully accept the person I am right now with all of my emotions? Are all of them welcome? All of the parts of myself, even the parts that I want to hide and be no one to see, are they welcome here? Am I ready to feel them?
Yeah, that's powerful. And what do once we decide to feel, I think for me, boundaries have always been an issue, oversharing or not sharing enough. It's like, how do you know, because awareness, we're speaking about awareness. How do you know when it becomes damaging? Like, what should be our warning sign?
When we're more attached to the story. So for a long time, I'm super attached to the story of how I became to be a person, how I got conceived and everything that went into that. But was I more attached to the story, or am I attached to living life in the here and now and being okay with what's happening in my life in the here and now? I've written my story, I've told my story, but am I accepting of who I am in that story, or am I still trying to figure out if I'm worthy of having a body and a life? I'm still trying to figure out, like, where's the acceptance, and how can I be more compassionate with myself without being so attached to the story? Because we're attached to that hope for story. Like, I just had the unicorns and ponies story that my birth mother would be, I've been looking for you for all these years, and she didn't remember where I was born. I had to remind her what state I was born in, because she had many children, even after me. And it was shocking that I had to remind her. And then once that's right. So either it was a really heavy denial on her part, or did she just It wasn't something that was important to her, but I was so attached to the outcome of that story that everything was obliterated in that moment. I had to rebuild and figure it out again.
That makes
So if we can let go
so
of
much
the
sense.
attachment to the story and be more attached to ourselves in the here and now, that's where the healing can come in.
And sorry to keep drilling down on this, Janet, asking for a friend.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what are some ways, like realistic ways that we can do that when we feel ourselves in that place of being stuck? And what are some thoughts and ideas, maybe some tools that we could use to come out of that and to be able to be present?
Doing some somatic exercises. Before I came up to talk to you, I was outside, I planted some flowers and I was checking on them, and my bulbs are blooming and it's exciting and it's not hot yet. And so I took my shoes off and I walked in the grass, and I'm attached to the earth. And I noticed my feet on the grass, and it was cold, and the sprinklers had been on earlier, so spots were still a little bit wet. So that was a somatic experiencing where I could actually feel my feet on the grass. Other times when I have started to feel numb or unfeeling, or you have that kind of fuzzy feeling, like pounding my feet on the ground, taking some deep breaths, and not just like in through your nose, out through your mouth, but like super. I do this with kids, and I call it fish breath, where you open your mouth as wide as you can and you let in some air.
I love it.
You get a little fuzzy. Yeah, I just opened my mouth and let in air, but you get a little fuzzy feeling in your head, and that's energy. And so like focusing on that energy, because it's a feeling in your body. So I can feel that energy in my head and I can feel it in my chest. So having some somatic experiences, even like putting your fingers together. So I have all 10 of my fingers together and then moving like my pinkies apart, my ring finger apart, my middle finger apart, and just noticing they're touching each other, my thumbs, over and over, as long as it takes for me to feel back in my body instead of floating like the movie director in the corner, like we talked about. Some somatic experiencing, so you're here now.
Yeah, that seems so doable at any given moment, just to be able to recognize that we are connected. And I think, and I don't know much about disassociation, but one of the things as I'm going through the healing process is I'm not able to do it as quickly. And I miss it, Janet. I miss being able to fling up that wall. I'm like, where did it go?
Well,
I think that's progress.
We flung up that wall for so long. Yeah, we flung up that wall for so long, and then we started putting more mortar on it to make it thicker so we don't let anybody else in. Because what if they see that we're not supposed to be here and we're a mistake? What does that mean? And that's a rhetorical question. That's not a real feeling, but it's, what happens if they know that I'm garbage?
Yeah. I mean, it's so difficult because I notice I'm not able to separate everything out as much, and it's uncomfortable. And it's like you said, is it the next level of feeling, the next level of awareness where it's
like this. Yeah. It's like after you've had a bad sunburn, and I'm really fair, so I've had a few, but then your skin starts to heal and it grows back and the peeling, and it's really sensitive and new. That's what it feels like. Like, don't touch me because I have growing new skin, right?
Exactly. It's like, where's my wall? It's like sheer now. I can't really hold it up. Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually maybe moving through the discomfort too in a way that feels safe. And, having someone like you to talk to.
And noticing that discomfort and not shaming yourself because you're uncomfortable or you're in discomfort, but not shaming yourself, but saying, oh, there's that feeling again, and it's welcome, and I'm going to sit with it and befriend it and give it some love.
Yeah. So you're so compassionate. I also wanted to talk to you. I think it's really important because we really have an open invitation. We want all parties of the constellation, anyone who supports change, to listen in, to be able to hear. And I think it starts by acknowledging the birth or original family, the adoptees, and the adoptive parents, and everyone else that's around this. But I wonder, with your experience, yes, there are, and I have so many. I'm so lucky. So what does that look like as far as if you have the ears of all of them? With your experience, both personal and professional, if you started with the original family, what would you most want them to know? What would you most want the adoptees to know? And what would you most want the adopted parents to know?
Wow, that's a really big question.
I know.
What would I want them to know? I would want them to know that they're all welcome. Many communities right now are torn apart within their own community, including, the adoption constellation community, where we're not accepting of each other's lived experience. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just we're not accepting. And if we can have the attitude of we're all welcome and I'll sit with you even if I don't agree with you, I think that's where compassion starts. I see so much, and I've gotten, I don't like the word triggered, but I've gotten like super annoyed with people or certain, I've seen people promoting and their adoption story and as birth parents. And sometimes I get a little bit bristly with it. And then that's a good opportunity to get curious. What's that really about within myself? I don't have to attack. I don't have to say a word, but what is that within myself? How can I be curious and resolve that for myself where I can be more compassionate and understanding? I don't have to like it or accept it, but can I understand that they may be coming from a place of pain as well? And can I welcome that and be okay with that? And it's super hard because I'm human and it's messy to be human.
Yeah. It's so messy. It's so interesting because I've held a lot of resentment against my birth mother who's now gone from this earth.
Mine is
because
as well.
I didn't get the response that I wanted.
Yeah.
But what happened the other day, I interviewed a birth mom anonymously. And that experience of doing what you just said, trying to push myself out of the way for a moment, it changed something in me.
Yes.
To be able to sit with her in her story and to be able to metabolize it. And I realized, oh my goodness, this is really what needs to happen. We don't have to agree to understand. But this is complicated and it's messy. And I think it also softens the experience as well, because if you can realize this is just covered in pain.
All of it is. It's the human existence is painful.
Yes. And so
human.
That is really my goal. And even listening, I've had some interviews where people are very, very angry. And I want to do the same thing where I provide space for that, because that also deserves,
of course,
to be heard.
To validate the anger for others and within ourselves. I've spent many years not allowing myself to be angry, just stuffing it back in or eating food so it'll stay in or whatever my coping skill was. But as I'm able to let some of that out and validate it and look at it differently, I feel so much better.
Yes. And let's talk about feeling better.
Yeah.
I want to, and as I'm sure many people out there are listening, we just want to know that it is possible to be able to enjoy life fully and figure out a way to integrate the trauma so that we can put our feet in the grass and feel it and not waste this precious life that we've been given. It's very, very hard because it's so easy. I don't want to say victimhood, but I have certainly tried that on for a long time.
It's a protection. It's a protection strategy, right? Staying enmeshed in our trauma. Because if I can stay in this muck, then I'm protected from feeling, or I'm protected from other people seeing how hurt I am, or I identify with the trauma because then I get the attention I need. But what we really need is connection. Not just attention, but connection to other people. And that's one of the things I've loved about being part of podcasts and the adoption community is just making those connections with people. I've made friends that are lifelong friends, and they've changed my life. And I get emotional about them because they're so important. But I've been able to detach from some of the story of the trauma and the unworthiness of living, of even being born. and I don't have to protect myself from all those emotions anymore. I can welcome them. There's not my favorite to be angry still. I'm still working on that, uh, but I can welcome your anger, my anger, and it's okay, but it's a protection strategy to stay in trauma.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's almost like another wall that you put up.
Yeah, because as a tiny little baby, I didn't have any choice but to feel pain, to not know where I was or who I was with. And the work of healing is bringing that into the present time with an adult lens and looking at it and bringing that tiny little baby Janet some love and acceptance. And sometimes I pat my chest because that tiny little baby needs some attention.
That's such a beautiful idea.
Yeah, it's not allowing myself to reject myself when I was rejected by the person that should have accepted me. But not rejecting myself has been the work. And as a tiny little baby, rejection and lack of attention could mean death. So of course, we're going to respond with that big trauma response. But as an adult, rejection doesn't mean death. It just means, I'm going to push through this and work through it and accept myself.
Yes. And I think, one thing that stands out is I'm doing a lot more reflecting and getting more aware or becoming more aware. It's like, oh my goodness, it's logical why it's happening, but it's not helpful. The self-sabotaging, the not completing things. A lot of times I don't even have the capacity to show up. That's all
Sure.
A lot better. But it's almost as if I'm, like you're saying, going ahead and rejecting. So I do it first so you can't.
Yeah. I'll push you away. I'll push you away first so you don't have an opportunity to push me away. Yeah. And that's why, there's in mental health, there's many adoptees and others that are diagnosed with borderline personality or narcissism or different things. And really, it's a trauma adaptation. We learn to adapt to our trauma by developing some personality traits that keep us safe. And when we develop these personality traits that keep us safe, we need connection and attachment to a safe person in order to heal those wounds that we have. I really look at a trauma lens. People really identify with their diagnoses often, and it's trauma response. And if I can help somebody understand that and give that connection and attunement and look at them in the eyes and have them look at me back and help them to feel like they're loved and appreciated just for being who they are, even if they have all of this stuff that's brewing on the inside. But you're welcome with me, and I'll keep you safe as long as you're with me, and we'll be okay. It really makes a difference.
It makes such a huge difference. And I think the word narcissistic is so terrifying.
Oh, it's just thrown out there like money,
Yeah.
It's just...
I look in the mirror and I think, am I don't want to be. What does that look like? How do you know if you really are? Yeah.
Often true narcissists would never ask that question.
Okay,
so it might be
God.
Okay.
Okay, shoot.
That's your tiny baby self wondering if you're okay. Is it okay to love me, to like myself? Is that okay?
Yeah. Wow. I felt that one for sure.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, I was talking to Anne Heffron. You don't look at who, wrote the book.
Oh yeah. Of course.
You don't look adopted. Yeah. Her perspective on things is so powerful. And she was talking about her skin.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt so different to hear her talk about her skin and not her body. Like, it was just like, my skin almost hurts. And it hurts for someone to touch my skin.
Yeah.
And I think about that in my own life. It's very hard for me to receive affection and to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And it's getting harder as I'm getting older, which I think is really, it's a sad thing to me. And I wonder what you can speak to that, because I have the gut instinct that is not a rare occurrence amongst the adoptee population.
It's not a rare occurrence. And I feel like I've said this already before. It's a trauma response, because when you're a baby, what do you want immediately?
touch.
Skin to skin touch. And so many of us in that era of baby scoop, when I was taken out one door and to my mother out the other door, I have sat and thought, I wonder who held me and what that was like. Because the wing I was born in, sadly, I've been told was called the bastard's wing. And did the nurse look at me and coo at me, or did she just carry me down the hall and put me in another bassinet, waiting for whatever happened next? Did I get that attunement? Was my skin stroked? Was I, held? Because now, babies are born and they come right out and they're put right on the mother's chest, and that skin to skin contact. And you see new dads, with that skin to skin contact, and no wonder our skin and we don't want to be touched. I go through those phases of I don't want to be touched. And then it's like, can somebody just please hold me? I want that too.
Yeah, and there's such a conflict. And I think too, and I don't know if it's okay to go down this path, but I think a lot of adoptees I've spoken to have suffered sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. And you have to imagine that further separates
the nervous system, yes. Because now, because our bodies are made to respond how they're made to respond. And sexual abuse helps or causes a response that does feel good, and it's confusing because it's wrong. I know this person shouldn't be doing this, but my body's responding. So then the person that's been abused, the victim that's been abused, their nervous system gets even more confused. So that felt good, but it was wrong. But I want it again, but I can't because it also hurt me. So it's very confusing. So I work with children that have been sexually abused, and we sort some of those things out. I talk very openly about your body's made to respond in a way that feels good when it's the right touch. And even when it's the wrong touch, sometimes our body will respond in a way that feels good, but it's very, very confusing. So we talk about those things. And for adoptees, and some people that have been sexually abused, they go completely the other way, where they're seeking partner after partner after partner, because now my body has value if I can be sexual with it. Mm-hmm. So it's figuring out I have value without all of those things, just as being a human being and a person. And then you add adoption onto it when you were rejected. There's just so much, but it's all nervous system and being aware how you feel in your body. That's important, and having value as a human being, not what your body can provide for others.
Oh my gosh, we need an exclamation point on that. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes it hard to be, I don't know if normal is the right word, but to have normal attachments and relationships and
secure attachment. It's the right word.
Yeah, what is secure? So what is the hope for a situation like that, where here I am 55, it's like, don't touch me, but hug me when I feel like it. And, I'm just curious, what can one do? How can you start to feel safe in your skin?
Mm-hmm. Working through that letting go of that need to have a story you're attached to.
Another exclamation point.
Yeah. Attaching to yourself, attaching to people in your life that are safe, understanding what the attachment process looks like, what the nervous system does, how your brain and body respond together. It doesn't make it easy, but it makes it a little bit more simple to understand. But it's finding that safe person, and allowing some touch.
Yes, that's really beautiful advice, Janet. And can you tell me about your, today, as you sit here with me?
Yeah.
How do you feel? How is your heart? How is your soul? How is your skin? Can you share with us? Because you were talking to me earlier before we pushed record about how you're kind of at a turning point where you want to go into another space.
Right. I'm walking into a new awareness where the story of where I came from isn't as important to me as what's happening now, and how I feel about who I am and where I'm going and what goals I have to accomplish, and how can I affect change and still be happy and still walk in the grass and still play with my dog and all those things that are important. I'm really at a turning point. I see a therapist, and we're really at a place where I am ready to burst out of myself, but I'm really scared as well. What does that mean? And how does that look? And what happens if I really, really accept myself and take care of my tiny baby self? And do I really have purpose? Those are a lot of big existential questions, but that's what's going on for me right now. It's just acceptance, self-compassion, acceptance.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in a really, really good place, in a strong place for sure.
And trying to change the narrative around some of the things in adoption for myself, and if others, it resonates with them, changing some of the narrative that we are just become accustomed to.
Can you be more specific about that?
Sure. I had a conversation about secondary rejection with someone, and I got to thinking, it's not secondary rejection if they never wanted you in the first place. It's all rejection. And, we get so attached to these themes and these phrases, and because that's what makes sense to us. But just being open to other possibilities and other ways of feeling and other types of awareness, just me changing for myself. And, I'm not going to say we should never say come out of the fog, because that's such a helpful phrase for people. But for myself, I'm walking into a new awareness because I didn't know. How do you know if you're in the fog if you don't know you're in the fog, right? You just don't have that awareness. So when I tumbled head first out of the fog because I found my story and it wasn't what I expected, I was really, my equilibrium was gone. But now that I've been on the other side of it for some time and done a lot of work and reflecting and reading and studying and, trying to keep my head on my shoulders and just stay alive some days, it's all awareness for me,
I think that is such a beautiful word just to really sink into.
Yeah. And what that awareness does is it gives me freedom away from that difficulty, that difficult story, that pain. It gives me a little bit of freedom, a little bit of space in between.
That's so beautifully said. So, Janet, as we begin to wrap things up, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you really wanted to speak today?
Just be gentle with yourselves. Whoever happens to hear this podcast, and you as well, Heidi, just be kind. Don't be so hard and push. Just let things happen as they come. You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't all have to get done today. Then
Can I get an amen?
Amen in the church. That's advice for Janet as well, because I am, as I said, the queen of busy, the queen of I have to accomplish and I have to become. But really, if I just settle into my body and allow myself acceptance, and I appreciate who I am, and I can see my courage and I can see the path where I've come from, and it gives me hope for the future.
Sorry.
Take a breath. Yeah. We just all need to take a breath some days. Yeah.
So beautiful, Janet. This time with you has been extraordinary.
I'm
I know
so glad to hear that.
I am helped by your words, and I know other people will be as well. And I just hope one day that we can walk in the grass together.
Yes.
with our
wonderful.
walls down.
No more walls. Yeah.
No more walls. And just so I can end with just a tiny little thought nugget for you.
Mm-hmm.
Before I do these podcasts, I say a prayer, do whatever, and I have a quote box. I'm obsessed with quotes.
I love that.
And I pulled one out, and I feel like it's something that needs to be shared with you. Sometimes our light goes out, but it is blown into the flame by another human being, and each of us owes deepest thanks to those who have rekindled this light.
That's beautiful.
And you've done that for me today.
Oh, I'm really touched. Thank you.
Thank you,
really. Janet.
And I hope we get to talk to you again.
Anytime.
Okay, Janet, I'll hope we meet in person when I can hug you. And I won't be afraid to hug you.
And our skin will love it.
And our skin's going to be like, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Exclamation point.
Yes.
Thank you, Janet.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bye.